All right, so Art's coming on to chat about his joyful experience with the Veterans Administration.
Yeah, I gotta say, if we'd have done this a few months ago when I first talked to you,
Uh huh.
you would have had a much more angry, negative person on your hands.
Yeah, you were when we first chatted. You were. I don't know. What do you think's changed in your? Have you had any forward momentum, or
No,
have you just gone into the point of resignation, like the
uh,
levels of?
Acceptance.
Yeah.
well, I think a couple of weeks ago I had the opportunity to be part of a town hall meeting with the VA in Salt Lake, and they had several of the higher ups of the VA administration here locally, and I had my questions screened by the screener, but they ran out of time before they got to me on the phone. So they prompted us to email the person who ran the town hall meeting. And I did that when I emailed her my question. And a couple of days later, she had somebody from the VA regional office contact me. And I guess, just so everybody knows what my issue is with the VA is, um, I I was in the Navy for 11 years, and I got out. I got out under some pretty poor circumstances. I got court-martialed because I got in trouble. Um, for what it's worth, I served my sentence, and I knew that I did something wrong, and I didn't fight it in the proper way. I thought I was fighting it the proper way, and I didn't. And the Navy basically crucified my ass and tossed me. And when I
But
got out of
there's more than just that, because regardless of a court martial, you got physically injured while you were in the Navy.
yeah,
And so I don't think the court martial should affect the injury. I don't think someone should
well,
get injured and then just because they had a judicial issues that they should lose the benefits for that injury that happened while they were in service.
well, the whole thing of it is I was injured when my ship exploded and had a pretty substantial fire that lasted for a couple of days. Um, I was injured during that chaos. That happened June 20th, 1990. And I didn't get court-martialed until June 22nd, 1991. And during that year in between, I had basically been taken off the ship because of my injuries. I was treated with physical therapy. And when they first took me off the ship and took me to the emergency room on the base, they noted, and I have records of this, that they noted that I had what they considered major depression, which is back then was terminology for PTSD. Because in the 90s, they didn't have PTSD diagnosis, they just
Mm-hmm.
depressed. So, um, and I was quite rattled mentally by what happened on that day. And
Can we take a minute and kind of go into just a quick synopsis of the details? You were part. What was the ship?
I was on the USS Midway. It's an
Mm-hmm.
aircraft carrier. Some people may know it as the tourist thing that they go to down in San Diego now. It's a big
Mm-hmm.
museum. Um, what happened that day was there had been a bomb buildup evolution the night before where we built about 350 bombs. I was part of that. I was actually the guy that QA'd all those bombs before they went up to the flight deck. And the following morning, things were normal. We were out to sea off the coast of Japan, not too far. And when they launched the mail plane off that morning, uh, not long afterwards, there was a report of some smoke. And so there's a team on the ship called the Flying Squad. They respond to all the ship's emergencies and casualties and stuff. And they went down to go find where the smoke came from. And as they went down, as they did as they were trained to, they sealed off every compartment as they go down investigating things. That way, if something does happen, it don't spread.
Yeah, they close on their way through, they close the bulkhead doors behind them.
Exactly.
Okay.
And now they went down there for smoke, so they were wearing oxygen equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what I'm saying here is they can't smell the atmosphere in the room that they're in. So they get down to, I believe it was the fifth deck, fifth deck, something like that. And there is a fuel tank below them, and the cover for it is in the room that they're in. And they see that they have a loose void cover on this hatch. It's sticking up a couple inches, and they transferred fuel into that tank that morning.
So that'd be like, to put it in non-naval terms, that'd be like a gas cap being open, right?
The vapors are coming out.
Yep, pretty much.
Okay.
Also in that room, you've got a direct line coming from a boiler that goes straight up to the flight deck where the catapults are to launch the planes. Okay, not a big deal, but they don't know this yet, but there's a pinhole leak in this steam line, and every time they charge that line, it goes to about 1100 degrees and it touches off the vapors. But they don't know that yet. Okay, they just know that they've finally come into this space and they see that they've got void cover that's loose, and coincidentally at the same time, their timers are going off on their oxygen breathing apparatus things that they're wearing. And so a couple of the guys go over into a little vestibule adjacent to the space, and they drop their tanks and they're switching them out so they can get, clean air again. And one of those two guys that went into that room was one of my closest friends. His name was Ray Wells. And he said he pulled his mask off just for a moment. And when he took his breath, he could smell the vapors, and he was like, oh shit. Put his mask back to his face and turned his head. And about that time, they launched the next plane up on the deck, and kaboom.
Mm.
Two of the guys were very close to that fuel void cover, and they were killed instantly in the blast. And the two guys in the vestibule were blown through a space, no kidding, about this big, that opened up in the corner of the wall and shot them clear across the next room until they basically hit the walls. My friend Ray said that when he came to, he realized he was on a stairwell that went up, and he started to go up the stairwell. He tripped over something and fell down. He realized he fell down on a body. He picked that guy up and carried him upstairs. And when they got to the second deck, I was coming from the space just forward of where he was coming up at. So I came through the hatch and basically almost ran into him as he came up, because I opened up the hatch. What I'm doing is I'm in my living quarters, because my shift, the guys on my shift, we're all supposed to be in bed sleeping. And the first blast about bounced me out of my rack. And there was a chief in my living quarters within a few seconds screaming to get all these guys out of here. I was the senior guy, so I'm evacuating all my guys out of this space. So I've got probably 20 to 30 guys with me. And I mean, we're in our skivvies. We're getting the hell out of there because the space below is on fire. Nobody got dressed. We're just getting the hell out. So when I went through this hatch looking for safe passage for us to get back to our shop, is where I encountered Ray. And when I opened up the hatch, there was a deck hatch that went down. Smoke is just rolling out of it. And all of a sudden, my friend Ray came up out of the hatch with a man on his shoulders, fireman style, and they were both in flames. I mean, to the point to where when they ran away from me, smoke trailed off their bodies. That's probably the first time I've said that without getting all choked up over it. It was quite the horrific thing to witness. Um, and he ran away from me because somehow he had the presence of mind to know that they'd have a triage unit. Me and my guys went through a different hatch and encountered a guy on watch who's basically a phone relay for damage control, and he's telling me that we can't go up this hatch, and I'm telling him that there ain't nothing but bombs and missiles underneath you for 5 decks, and you need to get the hell out of here, because if this fire is compromising any of those spaces, we're all in danger right now. And out of nowhere, I'm telling you, it was like a magician with the flash of smoke. All of a sudden, the executive officer of my ship is standing behind this guy, rips this guy headset off, screams on the phones, "This is the XO. Tell the bridge to quit launching planes now." And he looked at me, "Get these guys the fucking hell out of here." We went up the ladder. Right after I seen Ray, there was another blast that knocked us all down, and we went up the we went into the next rooms and had our little encounter with the XO. As we went up the stairs into the hangar bay, there was another blast that took place, and I watched a guy fall off of an F-18 that was up on top of it working. And when he hit the deck, he compound fractured his leg, and I ran through the blood spray as it shot across my path. And I went to my shop. 2 guys that were in my shop were kind of arguing over what they should do first. At the same time, the guy from Ordnance Control, which is basically the nerve center of all the weapon spaces on the ship, they're screaming that they've got smoke alarms going off and heat alarms up in the forward spaces, which is where we was just at. And at that point, I kind of took charge as I walked in the shop. Started responding to the request from Ordnance Control, sending my guys to places, guys that we escaped our living quarters with. I sent them all to a different shop to get clothing, and they brought me clothing. Everybody was dressed, and I started sending these guys off to places to inspect where there might be, fire spreading and stuff. And as I was doing it, I didn't know if I was ever going to see these guys again. I mean, I'm sending them to places where we literally have tons and tons of weapons. I mean, I've got a space up there that's got hundreds of 500-pound bombs, close to 100,000-pound bombs, and dozens of 2,000-pound bombs. And that's just in one room. And there's missiles for 2 decks below that. And that's just on one side of the elevator shaft. The same thing's on the other side of the elevator shaft. So I was kind of horrified as I set these guys up, but it needed to be done. Eventually, we had some heat alarms going off in a space that myself personally, my conscience wouldn't allow me to send anybody up to do these things anymore. I had to go. And I took some guys with me. We encountered this one hatch that was so hot that we couldn't open it up. And so I had one of the guys kind of cool off the hatch with a applicator fire nozzle that kind of creates a rain kind of a spray. And we opened up the hatch. When we did, we let oxygen into space, and we watched the insulation just literally burn off this wall, and the wall glowed like a cigarette cherry. And inside the space was things called destructor kits that we used to convert aircraft general 500-pound bomb. We can convert that into a aircraft dropped mine, and it'll just sit in the water, kill whatever comes up. But these are explosive type ammunition cases in there. They have fuses and boosters and stuff like that in them. And there was close to probably 165, 170 of them in this room. And me and my partner Joey just tossed these things out into the trunk outside. I mean, we had to get them away because they're literally this close to the wall. The next space we went to, not quite as bad, but we had a really hot wall where some insulation was burning, and 9-10 inches away, there's three pallets of 500-pound bombs, and I can't get any equipment down here to move this stuff. So me and my friend Joey broke the bands on the pallets, moved the bombs by hand to get them away from the hot wall. It was one of those two things there where I blew out my back, but just didn't really realize it because.
Now, just to retrace, you just said you were moving 500-pound bombs. Now, they may not weigh exactly 500 pounds, but they're called 500 pounds bombs because they're almost exactly 500 pounds. Actually, I think they're 514 pounds or something like that.
I think they vary in weight between about 485 and about 515.
Yeah.
And
that's heavy.
Yeah, and what it really comes down to is they have the explosive equivalent of 500 pounds of TNT, and that's what it really comes down to. But yeah, we had to move 27 of these bombs, and when I got back up to my shop, I took a little minute to kind of collect myself because I'm kind of like the leader of the shop, or at least one of the leaders of the shop.
Now, what was your rank at the time? You were an E5 or an E6, correct?
I was an E5, waiting for E6 results, basically. And I didn't make it. I missed it by like 0.4 points. It's just ridiculous. It's not even a test question. But anyways.
They should have gave you 4 points for that day.
Yeah, the Navy don't work that way, unfortunately. But yeah, I was trying to collect myself. This is by far the most scariest experience in my life, what's going on. And I went back to the fantail of the ship, which is on the hangar bay level, and they test jet engines back there, so it's open air. And I went back there, and when we're in port, my division stands watch up on this certain place, so I'm pretty familiar with it. And I went back there to get some air and just kind of be away from everything for a second. And when I went back there, I noticed that our escort ships were all right behind us in a single file line, real close to the ship, like 100 yards. And I've got 5 years worth of sea duty. I've never seen anything like this before. And it's like, wow, that's kind of a trip. And all of a sudden, this senior chief come up behind me. He says, "That's not good." I said, "What?" He says, "That's how they line up when they get ready to abandon ship." And I looked at him, I'm like, "Abandoned ship?" And he's like, "You better get back to your shop." And I just took off running back to my shop. And I didn't know if this guy was telling me, something for real, or if he just, exaggerating a little bit, but I've never heard anything about abandon no damn aircraft carrier. You know what I'm saying? It kind of freaked me out just to have him tell me that. But I did know this from what I had already seen of the fire. The fire is on the opposite side of the wall of a couple of different weapon spaces. And if that wall gets compromised, we're done. Because if one weapon goes off in one of those spaces, it's going to start a chain reaction that no one is going to stop. You know what I mean? That's why the magnitude of the explosive power of these rooms with all these weapons in it, you got to understand what it's capable of. And it's quite like I said, you blow up one 500-pound bomb in a room full of 500-pound bombs, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty rough chain reaction.
Yeah, so I already know this much already when he told me that. So I went back to my shop, and I took my turn to go fight the fire in the actual place where the fire was. And I'd done that a few other times in different big fires that we had on the ship. So I'm not brand new to it or anything like that. I've had my experiences, but this fire was different in how the walls were just glowing red. There was no insulation left on anything. It was all just bare metal walls, and they were glowing as red as your shirt.
What do you think caused it to burn that hot?
Because we've got fuel on fire.
Oh, did the fire go down into the fuel tank or the fuel well?
I don't know. I never got to where that was, but it would make sense that it's blowing, at least burning like a candle.
Yeah.
You know, fuel on the bottom and the fire on the top. But it took almost 2 full days to put the fire out, and the way they got it out, I mean, I watched them lower a pallet full of CO2 bottles down into this space, and they had it rigged up so they could light them all off at once. And that's basically how they killed this fire. They
Starved it of oxygen.
starved it of oxygen, just choked it out. But a couple of times when they opened up a hatch to go in there to see if it was out, they let oxygen in and started back up again. So finally they just closed it up and left it. They knew they had it out. And then they made arrangements to get us in port. Now, in my 5 years on this ship, it was the first time I'd ever seen us go into our home port with the air wing still on the flight deck. That was a big no-no with our agreement with Japan. And, you know, you don't come in looking like an offensive weapon. That's kind of the whole thing with them. And we couldn't do anything about it. So we came with all the planes. And it was 3 or 4 days, I believe, before they got the 2 guys that were still in space out because of the heat. And I remember the guys on the ship telling me that it was still like 900 degrees down there when they went and got the guys out. And if you can imagine that.
Yeah, that would be that I think I could easily commit to being a vegetarian after that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, when they took me off the ship, when we got in port, they took me over to the hospital to the emergency room. I remember going up forward to get some stuff out of my locker and stuff like that so I could leave the ship. And it was incredibly hot up there. I mean, you'd be walking along and just all of a sudden it's like you walk through this veil, this invisible curtain, and all of a sudden now you're in a warm place, and as you keep walking up it's warmer and warmer, and it gets cooler and cooler as you get away from it again. It was incredible how hot it was up there. But,
well, let's I don't think that we need to cover your court martial at all in this. You and I have talked about your court martial, and I don't think it has any bearing on your injury and your veterans affair case.
Actually, it just in one way it does, and that is this. I was finally diagnosed with what they considered major depression, and they wanted to put me on limited duty. They said I wasn't fit for a regular duty. They put me on limited duty and placed me on medical hold so that they could line up treatment for me at a mental health facility because they knew that I needed help. But it was after that I did what I did and when I did it, I went straight to the Navy and I'm like, hey, I did this and I don't feel good about it. I'm ashamed about it, but I did this. And they're like, don't worry, you're under treatment and we'll take care of you. You're not in trouble. The day after that, Naval Investigative Service came and apprehended me and I was in trouble. And when I went to my court martial, my lawyer, which I was his first ever case in the Navy, he was trying to represent me using my medical issues as my defense, and the judge wouldn't allow it. Okay, so they took a recess that lasted a couple of days, and during those couple of days that we was off, they talked me into signing a plea bargain agreement, which would limit what they could do to me. I mean, they could not give me a dishonorable discharge. They could not confine me more than 6 months. But I was already guaranteed that by my court martial being a special court martial and not a general court martial. They were already limited to not being able to do those things. So my plea deal didn't do shit for me. My lawyer didn't even realize that. So when I went back to my trial, I basically got sentenced, and the guy reamed me. And when I got out of the Navy, they told me you have no rights. You can't claim VA benefits. You can't do this. You can't do that. Can't pass go. Can't collect $200. And I was like, fine. But I always knew from day one that this happened. I always knew that upstairs wasn't the same as before. And I always felt like I wasn't quite right. And it wasn't until 2012. Now I got out. I got discharged in 1991. So in 2012, I'm having some other health problems, and I need to have a procedure. And I'm living in Vegas at the time, and I don't have insurance because I've already stopped working because I have a heart condition. We'll get to that part too, but I've had a heart condition for 11 years at this point. I've got congestive heart failure. I was only 39 when I was diagnosed. And now I'm having other health problems, and the state wants to do this procedure. They're like, hey, you need to go to the VA and have them give you a letter saying you don't have any benefits. And I'm like, that's no problem. I go down there, and they're like, hey, you got benefits? And I'm like, I do. And they're like, yeah. So they get me in the system. And when you first get in the VA system, they send you down for an intake physical. It takes a few hours. And that's where they talked to me about what happened on the ship. I really hadn't spoke to anybody about it in the 21 years that I've been out of the Navy. Because when I did it, I just got too worked up over it and upset and mentally broke down, and kind of not wanting to function for a couple of days after that. It was hard for me. So they diagnosed me with PTSD, sent me to mental health right after that, and I've been off and on in counseling ever since. The last few years, they've done a really good job working with me and had me in counseling that's been very effective and helpful to me. And I got to say off the top, my VA healthcare, I can't really complain about. I mean, it's got some little things here and there that I'm not too happy with, but for the most part, I get healthcare, and I'm very appreciative of that. My problem with the VA is when I first had my intake physical, afterwards they said you need to apply for disability because you've got PTSD and it's definitely service related, and they should have took care of you before you got out of the Navy. They should have never did what they did to you. So I said, okay, and I applied, got denied, appealed it, got denied. And after my denial, I was in the process of looking at moving up here to Twilla. And so the guy that I was working with then, he says, look, he says, ask the VA for all the records they use to deny your case. And then when you get to Salt Lake, refile your case, because the line up there to get through the system's a lot shorter than it is down here in Vegas, and you won't have to wait as long. I'm like, okay. So I get up here and I apply, and my application actually didn't get in until the fall of 2014, about this time, 2014. And I am still waiting for the VA to make a decision.
So we're at 6 years right now.
7
years.
Wow.
Now,
and that doesn't count the 2 years that I spent in Vegas doing this. And when I talked to this lady the other day at the regional office about that, she says, no, we don't have any cases that are older than 2014. I'm like, you need to look in my file. And she did. And she's like, wow, I didn't realize. She says, but your date still is only going to go back to 2014 because of the way it all happened. And I'm like, I'm fine with that, but can we at least make it move forward? And what's happened in the last week or two is, well, back in February, I had my hearing with the VA, and they have, my hearing was a couple of hours long. I spent an hour and 45 minutes testimony.
Hey, Art, can I ask you a question? Because a lot of people I know are still waiting for their hearing with the VA.
Oh, yeah.
What was this through video, or was it an in-person event?
It was a video. It was supposed to be in person. Well, they do it on a video, but I was supposed to go originally to the Salt Lake Regional Office and have my hearing on March 23rd of 2020. But that just happened to be the day the VA shut down because of COVID. So my hearing was postponed. My hearing got rescheduled for July, but my VSO wasn't prepared. And so, and then coincidentally, the VA shut down again. So then I didn't get my hearing until February. So it had been 11 months waiting to get my hearing after it had already been scheduled. And I got to say, these VSOs that veterans have to work with, I will say this, are useless. Okay, they're absolutely useless. I worked with the American Legion for a couple of years. The first year I was working with them was great. They helped me out a lot. Then the office staff turned over, and they just refused to talk to me now. But that's partly because I wanted to go in there and snap some necks because they pissed me off so bad. But they just, we can't find your information. Well, you're not in our system. And I'm like, I worked with this place for 2 years. How can I not be in your system? But that was the story I got. So then I got with the Utah Veterans Association, and they haven't really been a lot of help, but they are representing me.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really crazy about the VA right now is I can look, my case is considered a legacy case, and because it's so old. I can look on the system right now, and it'll show me being, 18,000 people back in line waiting for the board to make a decision. But that's not necessarily true, because my case is actually in remand right now while the regional office makes more investigation. And once they get all the information that they're looking for, they can put me up in the top of the list in a matter of just a click, I guess. Saying, yep, this guy's done, he's ready, put him in the batch of people we're going to hear today or whatever. But it'll show me being 18,000 people back. What's disturbing about that is when I first got into this, where I could look and see where I was at in the line, I was 77,000 people back in the line. That was the end of 2019. Okay. So there was another 70,000 people behind me in the line. So that takes it 150,000 people in the line. Okay. And that's just in cases that are older than 2018. It'll show right now that they have about 105,000 cases pending that are older than 2018. So that doesn't count from now until 2018. That's just 2018 and older.
Mm-hmm.
My grief with them is, how in the hell did you get such a backlog? There's 100,000 guys waiting. And here's my problem with everything. And this is what I want people to understand. They say 22 vets a day commit suicide. I got my little thing right here from the Valhalla Project. You guys have heard about that, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And they sell stuff like this. And the 22 vets a day killing themselves is kind of a skewed number. They've been saying that since about 2015. And it's kind of screwed up how they get all the data for that. It's probably, I've been told, it's closer to about 30 right now, ever since the COVID situation started. I don't know if that's exactly true or not, but I do know this. If there's 105,000 guys waiting to have their cases heard, some of them guys that are killing themselves are on that damn list. Okay. 5-6 years ago, they made this tremendous stink on the media over veterans dying waiting for their appointments. And a big thing down in Phoenix and a couple other regional places around the country, veterans were dying waiting for appointments. And I get it. That's wrong. And I'll agree with that all day. It's wrong. They enacted programs to try and get around, make it a better system. And they've done well with that, because I remember how it was before, and I see how it is now, and it's definitely improved. But the problem is, I think there's just as many veterans dying waiting for their cases to be heard and settled as there is waiting for appointments back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually confronted the lady from the VA regional office about this a couple of weeks ago when I spoke to her, and she didn't have any really solid information on that. Of course, she said, no, there's not. And I'm like, how do you know? And there's no way for her to know, or anybody else really to know, unless we started looking into all the different suicides that we have and was the guy on the list. And they're not going to do that. They're not going to look into all that. They have a hard enough time just finding out if they're a veteran or not.
Do you think it's a budgeting issue, or
I think that has a lot to do with it because, I mean, back, I think 2013, 2014, something like that, the VA was asking for like $1.5 billion for a budget, and they got 850.
Does money even fix this kind of stuff, though? I mean,
well, to a point it does, and a point it doesn't. Because here's the thing: right now, when Trump was in office, I don't know who found out about it, but somebody said, "Hey, the VA has got this huge backlog of disability cases, and they need to work through them." So they created this thing, the Legacy Program, to start filtering through these things. To my knowledge, and I asked the lady about this from the regional office the other day, and she told me no. So to my knowledge, is while they're working on these cases, they did not give them any extra budget in order to implement more people working through this backlog and resolving it. So in other words, they still have the same amount of staff working on the cases, judging the cases and all this shit. They didn't put any extra people on it. So how the hell are they going to get through it when they already had the backlog? But I will give them credit. They are getting through it to a point, because I can look and see how I'm closer up to the front of the line. But I mean, it's only moving forward about 2,000 per month. And that's a slow ass line. When you've got 100,000+ people waiting in line, that's a slow line.
And like also,
how many guys are dying, committed suicide, waiting for the VA to do something? And like me, I had my hearing in February. We still ain't got a decision. They remanded this thing. And here's where, like I said, that the VSOs don't really do shit. Neither does our congressman. Okay. I was encouraged to write Congressman Stewart. Congressman Stewart's a veteran. He'll help you. So I wrote to him, and his guy that does his veteran stuff contacted me, told him about what was going on. Send me your stuff. So I sent him my stuff, and he comes back to me a couple months later, and he says, yeah, we looked into what happened, and we're going to say what happened was fair and just, and there's nothing we can do. And I'm like, you couldn't possibly have looked into my stuff if you determined it was fair and just. And he's like, well, that's what we did, and the congressman doesn't really do anything with these kind of matters anyway. I'm like, then why did everybody tell me to write you? Mm-hmm. So he told me he looked into it. 2 days after his last email, I'm on the phone with this lady from the VA who did actually help me quite substantially. And we're on the phone with the National Archives, which is where they keep everybody's records when you get out of the military. And they said they had no record of me existing in the Navy from 1986 to 1991. And they believe that my records were destroyed in a fire at the Navy Personnel Command, probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I'm like, wonderful. So this guy couldn't have looked into anything if my records don't exist.
Yeah, you told me about that fire. I'm just wondering, well, and then you've got the added pressure of we entered 2 major wars since that time, which added more pressure, and I doubt they, matter of fact, I know they didn't have the forethought to boost up the
here's the whole thing.
The VA.
What's really bad is, since we got in those wars, there's a lot of guys, ground troops, Army people, Marines, Navy people, Air Force people that were all served on the ground in various capacities. And a lot of times the jobs that they had to do when they were going door to door were pretty horrific. And mentally, you can't imagine what it's like. I mean, I hear people, they're hunters, they're gun owners. That's all well and good. Things are a lot different when you have to pick up a gun and point it at another person and be within a trigger pull of taking their life. There's something that clicks in your head mentally when you have to do that. And some people deal with it better than others. Some people have tremendous PTSD for the things that they were asked to do. Some people went through horrific things. And so these 2 wars that we've been in has really increased the influx of people coming back to the States and kind of losing it, doing something where they got in trouble. And hey, guess what? We're going to court martial your ass and toss you. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, PTSD, these guys had PTSD and you shouldn't have took them. You shouldn't have took them out that way. You should have helped them. And that's where my thing lies, is they should have helped me instead of processing me out the way they did. And so I can show injustice in my case, just like these other guys can. And there's such a huge influx of these people that are in these situations from these last 2 wars that's part of the reason why there's 100,000 people on the backlog list.
Yeah, they left this out of the recruiting brochure, but this is exactly what happens straight from...
You got a brochure? Oh, you were in the Air Force.
This happens every single war that I think has ever been fought in the history of mankind. I mean, even our history teaches us the moment when George Washington stood up and told all his troops that, welcome to the suck, you're not going to get your benefits.
Yeah. Well, no, that's not to get, we should dig into that history one day because that's atrocious. But will you do us a favor? We need to round this out real quick, Art, but will you do us a favor, and when you finally get an answer from the VA, will you come back on? I want to do a
Sure.
full timeline.
Well, just to catch you up, what I got just in the last week or 2 from the VA is they sent me another letter stating that they're looking for information. And what they're looking for now is they're looking to see that if I've ever applied to the Board of Corrections, to the Navy Board of Corrections, to see if I get my discharge upgraded.
Okay.
Because the whole thing that's holding up my benefits is they consider, my discharge from the Navy is a bad conduct discharge.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of guys in the military refer to that as a big chicken dinner. That's what I got. And the VA can look at that as dishonorable for their purposes. And that's what they've done in my case. Now, what I've done to question them on that is, if I'm supposed to be on limited duty awaiting treatment for a mental health condition, how the hell was I fit to go to a court martial?
Oh boy, yeah, there you go. This might be something to. The sad thing is, you shouldn't have to fight all the way back that far to get redress now.
Yeah, and that's really the kicker. But so now they're looking for records that shows that I went to the Board of Corrections, which I did when I was working with the American Legion when they were actually helping me back in 2015 and early 2016. We sent a package in 2015 to the Board of Corrections, and when my representative talked to somebody in Washington, D.C., we was trying to find out the status of my stuff, he said that he couldn't find me. So we thought that meant that my stuff didn't get there, got lost in the process. So we sent another package off. Both of these packages were sent by the Salt Lake Regional Office, because when you're downstairs on the ground floor at your VSO, and anytime you send anything into the VA, you have to go upstairs and the regional office sends it off to you, and then you get a receipt. I don't know what's happened to my receipts for this stuff, but I know that they have a record of it. So next week when the offices open up again, that's where I'll be, is trying to find the receipts of me doing this, because that's what they're looking for now. But I mean, they've asked me for stuff that I can't possibly provide them. And even this stuff now that they're looking for, they could go to their own damn office and get the information. They're making me do that.
Yeah.
Well, Art, before we close up this this interview here, can you give some word of advice to the future seamen of the world, and just if you had to go back and do it all over again or whatnot, what would you tell them?
Join the Air Force, Coast Guard.
Well, first of all, if I had to relive the day that I got my injuries, I would definitely do it again. Okay, because what I did that day was important, and I did my job that day, and many people did their jobs that day, and that's why that ship is now a museum instead of sitting on the bottom of the ocean somewhere. I'm not taking credit that I saved the ship or anything like that, but I did my job that day, and some of the things we did were pretty damn important. If I was to give anybody any advice that's in the military or that's thinking about going in the military, I would tell them, keep a record of every damn thing that you do. If you can get your hands on, like normally when you're in the Navy, back in my day, you had your entire service record, medical record, dental record, everything when you went from one command to the next transferring. Mm-hmm. When you have that record in your hand, make a copy of every single thing in it. Make sure it's legible, and it's readable. Keep those copies. I mean, if you have to put them in a safe deposit box where your mom and dad live, wherever, keep those records, because they're going to help you someday when they come up and tell you, oh, we ain't got a record of that. Because my case, they say they can't find my records right now, but the records that they used to deny me originally in 2012 were from my own service record. So how is it they got some of my service record, but not all of my service record?
You know, I can tell you that too. There's been certain instances where I've had to root up some of my old records from when I was in the military, and I don't know. I think it'd be a good investment if you've got a son or daughter joining the military to buy them one of those little scanners so they could just, email it to mom or dad, and mom and dad can store it for them.
Exactly. But I would say more important than an electronic record is a hard copy record. That's why I say make copies of everything. Because I can show you in the records that I have where between 1980 and 83, I went to certain schools, and they, you graduate from a school, it gives you a code number or whatever, say that's your record. I can go to my record from 86 to 91, and it ain't in there.
Yeah, that happens quite often. And
exactly.
Stuff gets
lost. A lot of training you go through doesn't get logged in because it has to be logged into your training record. Then that training record has to go to personnel, get logged into your service record, and somewhere along the line, somebody tripped over a hurdle and didn't get it to where it needed to go, and now you didn't get credit for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that happens in so many different things, and it just sounds stupid that how could it possibly happen? Trust me, it happens, and it's pretty common. Yeah. So I would say if you're in the military, you're thinking about it, make a copy, make a record of everything you got electronically, make a hard copy of it, everything.
That's a good idea to do at any regular job too.
Yeah.
CYA.
Exactly.
If you get any new safety briefings or any new safety thing. But Art, we've got to cut you loose. Okay. But please, when you hear anything else from the VA, just shoot me a message. We'll have you back on, even if it's just a quick one. There's a few comments that rolled in, and I'm just gonna quickly give a kind of a brief answer that yes, it is ridiculous to have to wait 7 years after applying for pay when you've been injured. And there is more to this story, and Art has told me the story, but again, I stand by, if you received an injury, even if that injury is a PTSD while in service, I don't care your discharge status, you should be treated for that.
Yep.
And that is what we're talking about here today.
Well, another thing people don't understand is you ain't got to be in combat to have PTSD.
No, you don't.
Okay.
You do not. A lot of PTSD can it can happen for a lot of reasons, especially young ladies in the military are receiving it not in combat. They're receiving it from other horrendous things that happen.
Yep.
But anyways, Art, thanks for coming on. Everyone, we're going to hop off real quick and kind of reboot this to two separate shows, but we've got Tracy Shaw here waiting with us. She is our county clerk. And the county clerk is one of the most important positions in your county. They're the bulwark to make things happen correctly. And so we're going to interview Tracy, ask her about herself, and ask her how she feels this last election went. And, chat with her. And so we'll be right back on. It'll be about 3 minutes.
And again, Art, thank you for your service. Thank you for saving that aircraft carrier, man. I got to take a tour on it once.
I didn't save it. I just,
you did your part, man. You did your part.
There was a whole bunch of people that did their parts that day.
Yep.
It was just part of the cog, you know what I mean?
Part of the cog on the wheel. You make the process go around, and now we have an aircraft carrier for a museum.
Yeah.
You guys deserve thanks too. I know you're both veterans, so again, thank you too. I have tremendous respect for all veterans. So
yeah, yep. Thanks again, Art, and we will talk to you again real soon. All right, just reach out anytime. We'll throw you on. The minute you hear anything, we'll throw you on.
I'll keep you. They told me it'll be another 120 days now. So.
Okay, good.
Hang in there, buddy.
Good. See if we can't round it out to a good decade.
Make sure you outlive this.
Yeah.
Hey, that's the other thing with my congestive heart failure. I'm hoping I do.
You will.
Well, let us know if we can help out or anything else. And yeah, it's a big thing. Thanks again, Art. Everyone, we'll see you back on here in about 3 minutes.